Ambassador Veltar had seen many wars. In his 300 years of life, he had watched 17 different species rise to power and fall into dust. His job was simple: go to different worlds, watch what happened, and write reports for the Galactic Council. He was very good at his job. The Council sent him to many places. He saw the crystal beings of Kepler fight with bodies made of living glass. He watched the bug-like Vorthens swarm across entire star systems like angry insects. He had seen species with technology so advanced it seemed like magic. He had also seen primitive tribes throw rocks at starships, but the humans were different. Not because they were special, but because they were so ordinary. Veltar remembered the first time humans came to the Galactic Council. Their ships were small and ugly. Their weapons were basic. Their leader, Admiral Te-Ho, was a quiet man with dark hair and serious eyes. He spoke slowly and carefully, like someone who thought before he talked. "We come in peace," Te-Ho had said. "We want to learn from you and share what we know." The council members had laughed. Not out loud, but Veltar could feel their amusement. These humans had just learned to travel between stars. Most species in the council had been doing that for thousands of years. What could humans possibly teach them? The council gave humans something called observer status. It meant they could watch meetings but not vote on anything important. It was like giving a child a toy to keep them quiet while adults talked about serious things. Veltar thought the humans would be upset about this. Most species got angry when they were treated like children, but Admiral Te-Ho just nodded and said, "We understand. We have much to learn." For 2 years, Veltar watched the humans at council meetings. They sat quietly in the back. They asked simple questions. They wrote down everything they heard. Their chief strategist, a woman named Su-Jin, took notes on a small electronic pad. She had short black hair and sharp eyes that seemed to catch every detail. Su-Jin never spoke during meetings, but Veltar noticed she watched everyone. Not just the speakers, but the listeners too. She studied how different species reacted to news. She paid attention to who agreed with whom. She was learning, but not just about technology or science. She was learning about politics and war. The humans had brought other people too. There was Minho, a young pilot who flew one of their military ships. He had a quick smile and moved like someone who was used to danger. There was also Jiwon, a tough-looking woman who commanded human soldiers. She rarely smiled and always sat where she could see all the exits. Most council members ignored the humans completely. They were too busy with important matters. There was always some crisis happening somewhere in the galaxy. Pirates attacking trade routes, old enemies starting new fights, the usual problems that happened when thousands of different species tried to live together. But Veltar kept watching the humans because that was his job. He noticed things that others missed, like how Admiral Te-Ho never interrupted anyone, even when they were clearly wrong about something. Or how Su-Jin's questions seemed simple but were actually very clever. She would ask things like, "How do you decide when a war is worth fighting?" Or what makes some species harder to defeat than others? The answers to these questions were in every military textbook. But Su-Jin asked them anyway, and she listened to every word of the replies. Then the Devourers came back. Veltar had heard stories about the Devourers his whole life. They were like monsters from old tales that parents told to scare children. Except the Devourers were real, and they were not just stories. The Devourers were an ancient race that traveled from system to system. They would arrive at a world with hundreds of massive ships. They would destroy all life on the planet. Then they would break the planet apart and eat it, taking all the metals and minerals to build more ships. They had been doing this for thousands of years. Most of the time, the Devourers stayed far away from civilized space. They attacked empty worlds or primitive species that could not fight back, but sometimes they got hungry for worlds that had good resources. When that happened, entire civilizations disappeared. The Council had fought the Devourers before. Sometimes they won, sometimes they lost. The wars were always terrible and cost millions of lives. The last time the Devourers had attacked was 50 years ago. They had destroyed 3 entire star systems before the Council managed to drive them away. Now they were back, and they were heading for Earth. The news came during a regular council meeting. A messenger ship had detected a massive Devourer fleet moving through space. Long-range sensors showed at least 300 ships, each one the size of a city. They were heading straight for the Sol system where humans lived. When Admiral Te-Ho heard the news, his face did not change. Su-Jin stopped writing in her notebook and looked up. Minho's smile disappeared. Ji-won's hand moved to her weapon, even though there was no danger in the council chamber. How long do we have? Taeho asked. 4 days until they reach your outer planets, the messenger replied. 6 days until they reach Earth. The council chamber became very quiet. Everyone knew what this meant. The human species was about to be wiped out. There was nothing anyone could do about it. The council's main fleet was too far away to help. Even if they could get there in time, 300 Devourer ships were too many to fight. Some council members looked sad. Others looked uncomfortable. A few looked secretly relieved because humans had been asking too many questions lately, and their questions made some species nervous. But Admiral Taeho just stood up and bowed to the council. Thank you for telling us, he said. We will prepare our defenses. Admiral, said the council leader, an old being covered in blue scales, perhaps your people should consider evacuation. We can help relocate your population to other worlds. Taeho shook his head. Earth is our home. We will defend it. Against 300 Devourer ships? Another council member asked. That is impossible. Maybe, Taeho said. But we have to try. Veltar watched the humans leave the chamber. They walked together, talking quietly. They did not look scared or panicked. They looked like people who had a job to do. The council decided to send Veltar to observe the battle. It would be his job to record the end of the human species. He was not happy about this assignment. He had grown to like the humans during their time at the council. They were polite, curious, and honest. It seemed unfair that such a young species should die so soon. Veltar prepared his observation ship and set course for Earth. He would arrive just in time to watch the Devourers destroy another world. He had seen it happen before, and it was never pleasant. But it was his job, and he was very good at his job. As his ship jumped into hyperspace, Veltar wondered if the humans would run when they saw the Devourer fleet. Most species did. There was no shame in it. Sometimes running away was the smart choice. But somehow he did not think the humans would run. There had been something in Admiral Taeho's eyes when he said they would defend their home. Something that reminded Veltar of old stories about heroes and legends. Of course, heroes and legends usually died at the end of their stories. Veltar just hoped the humans would make their deaths count for something. Veltar's ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. He immediately activated his long-range sensors and began scanning for the human fleet. What he found made him check his instruments twice to make sure they were working correctly. The humans were not where they were supposed to be. Every military textbook in the galaxy said the same thing about defending your home world. Gather all your ships together, form a strong battle line, and fight as one united force. This gave you the best chance to hurt the enemy before they destroyed you. But the human ships were scattered all across the solar system. Some were hiding behind asteroids. Others were floating near the gas giant planets. A few were even positioned close to their own sun, where the radiation would make it hard for sensors to detect them. Veltar had studied human military records during his trip to Earth. Their fleet was small, only 47 major warships, plus about 200 smaller vessels like destroyers and fighters. Against 300 Devourer ships, they should have kept their forces together to have any chance at all. Instead, they had split up into tiny groups. It made no sense. Veltar positioned his observation ship safely behind Earth's moon and waited. The Devourer fleet would arrive soon, and then he would see how the humans planned to die. The Devourers came out of hyperspace like a storm of metal and death. Their ships were enormous, each one shaped like a giant black knife. They moved in perfect formation, with the largest vessels in the center and smaller attack ships spread out in a wide circle. Veltar had seen Devourer fleets before, but never one this big. 300 ships meant they were planning to strip mine the entire solar system, not just Earth. They would take everything, the rocky planets, the gas giants, even the asteroids. When they were finished, there would be nothing left but empty space. The Devourer Admiral sent a message on all frequencies. The voice was cold and mechanical, translated by universal communication systems into every known language. Creatures of the third planet, the message said, you will surrender your vessels and prepare for harvesting. Resistance will only cause additional pain before your inevitable destruction. Admiral Taeho's reply came from somewhere near Mars. His voice was calm and steady, just like Veltar remembered from council meetings. "This is Admiral Tejo of the Earth Defense Force. You are not welcome in our system. Leave now or we will make you leave." The Devourer fleet paused for a moment. Veltar could imagine their confusion. A tiny fleet scattered across space, threatening creatures that had conquered half the galaxy? It must have seemed like a joke. The Devourer Admiral laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Primitive creatures, you have 47 military vessels against our 300. Mathematics declares your defeat." "Math is important," Tejo agreed. "But math is not everything." That was when the first human attack began, and Veltar finally understood why the humans had scattered their ships. The Devourers had expected a traditional battle. Ships lined up against ships, weapons firing until one side was destroyed. But the humans were not fighting a traditional battle. They were fighting like hunters. Squad leader Minho led the first strike. His group of 12 fighters had been hiding in an asteroid field near the edge of the system. When the Devourer fleet passed nearby, the fighters did not attack the warships. Instead, they targeted the supply vessels at the back of the formation. The human fighters were tiny compared to Devourer ships, but they moved fast and carried powerful nuclear weapons. They did not try to win a long battle with laser fire and missiles. They flew straight at their targets and rammed them, detonating nuclear bombs at the moment of impact. In 30 seconds, Minho's squadron destroyed 6 supply ships that the Devourers needed to process captured resources. The cost was 12 human fighters and their pilots. By normal military thinking, this was a terrible trade. 12 pilots for 6 supply ships. But Veltar was beginning to understand that humans did not think about war the same way other species did. The Devourer fleet tried to respond, but the human fighters were already gone. The survivors had disappeared back into the asteroid field, where the big Devourer ships could not follow without risking damage from floating rocks. More attacks came from different directions. A group of human destroyers hit the Devourer fleet from behind, targeting their communication ships. Another squadron attacked from above, going after the vessels that carried the Devourer's war machines. Each attack was small. Each attack cost human lives, but each attack also made the Devourer fleet weaker in ways that would matter later. Veltar watched Admiral Tejo's strategy unfold and felt a chill run through his alien body. The humans were not trying to win a single big battle. They were trying to cripple their enemy's ability to do what Devourers did: strip planets bare and move on to the next target. Chief Strategist Sujin's plan became clearer as the hours passed. The scattered human ships were not randomly placed. They were positioned to attack the Devourer fleet from multiple angles, never giving them a chance to focus all their firepower in one direction. But the most disturbing part was how the humans fought as individuals. Veltar had recorded battles involving dozens of species, and he had never seen anything like this. When a human ship was damaged and could not escape, the pilot did not surrender or try to save his life. Instead, he would aim his dying ship at the largest enemy target he could reach and ram it at full speed. The humans called this making it count. Lieutenant Donghyun's destroyer had its engines shot out during an attack on a Devourer command ship. Instead of ejecting in an escape pod, he locked the controls and flew his ship directly into the enemy vessel's bridge. His final transmission was simple: "For Earth, for everyone who comes after us." The explosion destroyed both ships, killing everyone on board. One human destroyer for one Devourer command vessel. By the numbers, it was an even trade. But command ships were much harder to replace than destroyers. More importantly, the other Devourer ships had seen what happened. They had watched a human pilot choose death instead of surrender. They had seen someone destroy himself just to hurt his enemies a little more. The Devourers had conquered thousands of worlds, but they had never fought an enemy that treated death as a weapon. Down on Earth, Commander Ji-won was preparing for a different kind of battle. The Devourer invasion troops were already launching from their ships, heading for the planet's surface in massive landing craft. Most species would have tried to stop the landing craft in space or on the beaches, but Ji-won had studied the reports from previous Devourer invasions. She knew that trying to stop them from landing was pointless. They had too many ships and too many soldiers. Instead, she prepared to fight them in the cities and towns where her people lived. Ji-won's Marines did something that shocked Veltar when he intercepted their communications. They were not evacuating civilians from the combat zones. Instead, they were teaching ordinary people how to fight. Shopkeepers learned to make bombs from household chemicals. Teachers learned to set booby traps in school buildings. Even children were taught how to pass messages and spot enemy movements. The humans were turning their entire world into a battlefield, where every street, every building, and every room would cost the Devourers time, soldiers, and equipment. As the first Devourer landing craft reached Earth's atmosphere, Veltar finally understood what made humans different from every other species he had studied. Other species fought to preserve their lives and their civilization. Humans fought to make sure that anyone who threatened them would suffer for it. They had turned their own mortality into a tactical advantage. When a human died fighting, he made sure to take enemies with him. When a human city fell, it fell like a trap that crushed the conquerors. When a human ship was destroyed, it was destroyed ramming into something important. The Devourers were learning something they had never experienced in thousands of years of conquest. What it felt like to be afraid. As Veltar watched the first day of battle end, he realized he was not recording the destruction of the human species. He was recording something else entirely, something that would change how every species in the galaxy thought about war. He was recording the birth of a nightmare that would haunt the dreams of anyone who thought humans were weak. By the third day of battle, Veltar had stopped thinking of this as a war and started thinking of it as something else entirely. He was watching evolution happen in real time, as an entire species transformed itself under the pressure of extinction. The human casualties were terrible. Almost half their fleet was gone. 3 major cities on Earth had been captured by Devourer ground forces. By every measure that galactic military experts use to judge battles, the humans were losing badly, but the Devourers were learning to fear empty space. Admiral Tejo had done something that military historians would study for centuries. He had turned the entire solar system into a weapon. Every asteroid, every moon, every piece of space debris had become part of an enormous trap that closed tighter around the Devourer fleet with each passing hour. Veltar watched through his ship's sensors as a group of human engineers, led by a woman named He-Jin, finished work on their latest project. They had been hollowing out large asteroids for months before the invasion began, filling them with nuclear explosives and remote control systems. When a Devourer patrol came too close to the asteroid belt, the humans triggered their trap. Dozens of asteroids exploded at once, sending clouds of radioactive rock fragments in all directions. The Devourer ships that survived the initial blast found themselves flying through a deadly storm of debris that cut their hulls like invisible knives. But what truly disturbed Veltar was not the trap itself. It was how the humans had built it. The asteroids they had used were mining sites where thousands of humans worked to extract metals and minerals. When He-Jin's team turned these asteroids into bombs, they destroyed their own jobs, their own sources of income, their own future. The humans had sacrificed their economic future to create weapons that could only be used once. They had burned their bridges before the battle even started, making sure they could not retreat or surrender. Other species fought to protect what they had built. Humans fought as if they had already lost everything and had nothing left to lose. Squadron leader Yunwu had replaced Minho after his death in the first day's fighting. Yunwu was younger, maybe 25 years old by human standards, but he fought with the cold intelligence of someone much older. Veltar intercepted his communications with other human pilots and felt something he had never experienced before while observing a battle. Genuine fear, Phoenix Squadron. This is Phoenix Leader. Yunwu's voice came through the radio. Target the supply chain, not the warships. Make them choose between protecting their food or protecting their ammunition. The human fighters had started attacking the Devourer's logistical support network. Food ships, fuel tankers, repair vessels, ammunition carriers. All the unglamorous ships that kept a fleet operating. These vessels were usually protected by only a few guards because no sane enemy would waste military resources attacking supply lines instead of warships, but the humans were not attacking these ships to destroy them quickly. They were attacking them to force the Devourers to make impossible choices. When human fighters threatened a fuel tanker, the Devourer commander had to decide: send warships to protect it, or let it be destroyed and watch his fleet run out of energy. When humans attacked an ammunition carrier, did he risk his battle cruisers to save it or let his fleet run out of weapons? Every choice was wrong. Every decision cost something valuable. The humans had created a situation where the Devourers could not win, only choose how they wanted to lose. Chief Strategist Su Jin's plan was even more terrifying when Veltar finally understood it completely. She was not trying to defeat the Devourer fleet. She was trying to trap it. The scattered human ships were not positioned randomly around the solar system. They were positioned to herd the Devourer fleet toward specific locations. Like shepherds driving animals toward a pen, the humans were using their attacks to push their enemies exactly where they wanted them to go. Su Jin had turned the space around Earth into a funnel. Every time the Devourers tried to maneuver, they found human ships blocking certain paths and leaving others open. Without realizing it, the Devourer fleet was being guided into a position where they could not escape quickly, and Su Jin had prepared something special for them there. Down on Earth's surface, Commander Ji-won's ground war was teaching the Devourers lessons they had never learned in thousands of conquests. The Devourer invasion force had captured the city of Seoul, but holding it was proving impossible. The humans had not fled when the aliens arrived. Instead, they had gone underground and started fighting like ghosts. Every building in Seoul had become a fortress. Every sewer tunnel had become a highway for human soldiers. Every basement had become a weapons cache. The Devourers controlled the streets and the skies, but the humans controlled everything else. Sergeant Kyung-soo led a squad of Marines who specialized in what they called urban hunting. They would wait in abandoned buildings until Devourer patrols passed by, then attack with homemade explosives and captured alien weapons. After each attack, they would disappear into the maze of tunnels that humans had built under their cities. The Devourers tried to flush them out by destroying buildings, but this only made the fighting worse. Collapsed buildings provided more hiding places. Rubble-filled streets made it harder for Devourer vehicles to move. Every act of destruction created new advantages for the humans. But the most disturbing thing was how the human civilians behaved. In every other conquest, civilian populations either fled or surrendered when military forces arrived. But human civilians did something different. They helped their soldiers fight. Old women passed information about Devourer movements. Children carried messages between resistance groups. Shopkeepers hid weapons and supplies in their stores. Even injured people in hospitals provided intelligence about enemy positions. The entire human population had become a military force. There were no non-combatants, only people who fought with guns and people who fought with information. Captain Yang Ho's Special Forces team demonstrated another human characteristic that Veltar had never seen in galactic warfare. They learned from their enemies faster than their enemies learned from them. Within 2 days of fighting, Yang Ho's soldiers were using captured Devourer weapons more effectively than some Devourer troops. They had figured out how to hack Devourer communication systems and send false orders. They had learned to mimic Devourer movement patterns and infiltrate enemy positions. But most importantly, they had learned how Devourers thought. And they were using that knowledge to set psychological traps. Devourers were used to enemies who fought to preserve their own lives. When facing such enemies, Devourer tactics focused on making resistance so costly that surrender became attractive. But humans did not surrender when resistance became costly. Instead, they became more dangerous. The more humans died, the more creative and vicious the survivors became. Yang Ho's team started leaving bodies of dead Devourer soldiers in places where they would be found by Devourer patrols. But these were not ordinary war casualties. These bodies showed signs of creative violence, weapons removed, equipment stripped, evidence of psychological warfare that the Devourers had never encountered. The message was clear. Humans did not just kill their enemies. They enjoyed it. This was not true, but the Devourers did not know that. They saw the evidence and began to fear what humans might do to prisoners. They started fighting more defensively, avoiding risks, second-guessing their orders. Fear was becoming a weapon that worked both ways. The humans feared extinction, so they fought without caring about their own lives. The Devourers had started to fear humans, so they fought while caring too much about their own safety. Veltar realized that he was watching something unprecedented in galactic history. He was watching a primitive species teach an ancient race what terror felt like. The Devourers had always been the monsters in the darkness, the nightmare that civilizations whispered about. Now they were learning what it felt like to be afraid of the dark. As the third day ended, Admiral Tejo sent a broadcast on all frequencies. His voice was tired but still calm, still steady. "Devourer fleet," he said, "you came here to harvest our world. But this world does not want to be harvested. Every hour you stay here costs you ships, soldiers, and time. Every day you fight us makes you weaker. You can still leave. We will not stop you from going. But if you stay, we will make you regret it." The Devourer Admiral's reply was angry now, no longer cold and mechanical. "Primitive creatures, you have already lost. Your defenses crumble. Your cities fall. We will finish this conquest and move on to easier prey." Tejo's response chilled Veltar's blood. "That is what we are counting on." Veltar suddenly understood the true horror of Sujin's strategy. The humans were not just trying to defeat this Devourer fleet. They were trying to damage it so badly that word would spread to other Devourer fleets, other Devourer commanders. They were fighting to create a reputation. They wanted every Devourer in the galaxy to know that attacking humans was not worth the cost. They were turning their own desperate battle into an advertisement that would protect their species for generations to come. On the fourth day, something happened that Veltar had never seen in 3 centuries of recording galactic conflicts. The Devourers, who had never retreated from any battle in recorded history, began pulling back from individual engagements. It started small. A Devourer patrol encountered human fighters near Jupiter and chose to avoid the battle instead of engaging. A ground unit in Mumbai received orders to abandon a captured position rather than defend it against a human counterattack. These were tiny retreats, almost meaningless in the scope of such a large battle. But Veltar understood their significance. The Devourers were starting to calculate whether individual fights were worth the cost. That kind of thinking was poison to a military force that had conquered half the galaxy through pure aggression. Admiral Tejo had achieved something impossible. He had made the Devourers afraid to fight. The human fleet was down to 19 major warships and maybe 50 smaller vessels. On paper, they were weaker than ever. But the remaining ships were concentrated in exactly the positions Sujin had planned, forming the final part of her solar system-wide trap. Veltar watched as the last phase of the human strategy unfolded like a deadly flower blooming in space. The human ships had spent 3 days herding the Devourer fleet toward a specific region between Mars and Earth. The Devourers thought they were winning because they were advancing toward their target. They did not realize they were being guided into a killing ground. Sujin had prepared this region carefully. Months before the invasion, human engineering teams had placed nuclear mines throughout this area of space. Not the simple explosives they had used in the asteroid belt, but sophisticated weapons designed to work together. When the Devourer fleet reached the center of the minefield, Captain Jae-sung triggered what humans called the firewall. 200 nuclear devices exploded simultaneously in a carefully designed pattern. The explosions created a wall of radiation and debris that stretched across thousands of kilometers of space. Any ship trying to pass through it would be destroyed. But the firewall did not just block escape routes. It also cut the Devourer fleet in half. Half the Devourer ships were trapped between the firewall and Earth, where the remaining human fleet waited for them. The other half was trapped between the firewall and the outer solar system, where they faced a different problem. The humans had been preparing for this moment since the battle began. Engineer teams led by Dr. Boram had been working around the clock to convert civilian spacecraft into weapons. Cargo ships became missile platforms. Mining vessels became bombers. Even passenger liners were loaded with explosives and set on collision courses. The Devourers suddenly found themselves fighting not just the human military, but the entire human civilization. Every ship in the solar system had become a weapon pointed at their hearts. Squadron leader Yunwoo led the attack on the trapped portion of the Devourer fleet. His remaining fighters moved like a pack of wolves, striking at weak points and disappearing before the enemy could respond. But Yunwoo was not just trying to destroy enemy ships anymore. He was trying to send a message. All human units, his voice came over the radio, calm and professional. Target their command ships first. Make them choose between saving their leaders or saving their soldiers. The human fighters ignored easier targets and focused on vessels carrying Devourer commanders. These ships were heavily protected, making them difficult to destroy. But the humans did not need to destroy them. They just needed to force the Devourers to make impossible choices. When human fighters attacked a command ship, nearby Devourer vessels had to decide whether to break formation to protect their leader. If they did, they left other ships vulnerable. If they did not, their commanders might die. Either choice created opportunities for more human attacks. Down on Earth, Commander Jiwan had started the final phase of her ground war. For 3 days, her forces had been fighting a defensive battle in the cities. Now they were going on the attack. The humans emerged from their tunnels and bunkers and coordinated strikes across all captured territories. They had been preparing for this moment, stockpiling weapons and supplies in hidden locations throughout their cities. Sergeant Major Insu led an assault team that recaptured the Seoul city center in 4 hours of brutal fighting. But they did not try to hold the ground they had taken. Instead, they destroyed everything the Devourers had built there and disappeared back underground. The Devourers realized they were not fighting to control territory anymore. They were fighting to prevent humans from destroying it. Every building the Devourers captured became a target for human demolition teams. Every communication center they established was bombed by human commandos. Every supply depot they built was raided by human guerrillas. The humans had made it impossible for the Devourers to benefit from their conquests. Controlling human territory had become more expensive than abandoning it. But the most significant change happened in space, where Chief Strategist Su Jin revealed the final component of her master plan. The human fleet's seemingly random movements over the past 3 days had not been random at all. They had been positioning key vessels in specific locations around the solar system's gravity wells. Su Jin had turned the sun itself into a weapon. Captain Wanshik commanded a specially modified cargo ship that had been accelerated to incredible speed using gravitational slingshot maneuvers around multiple planets. His vessel was now moving fast enough to cause devastating damage to any ship it hit. But Wanshik was not aiming at a ship. He was aiming at the largest Devourer vessel in the fleet, a massive world cracker that the Devourers used to break apart planets for harvesting. The world cracker was the size of a small moon and carried enough firepower to sterilize Earth's surface. Destroying it would cripple the Devourer fleet's ability to complete their mission, even if they won the battle. Wanshik's ship struck the world cracker at nearly 1/10 the speed of light. The impact released energy equivalent to several thousand nuclear weapons, vaporizing both vessels instantly. The explosion lit up space like a new star, visible from Earth with the naked eye. When the light faded, the largest weapon in the Devourer fleet was gone. More importantly, Wanshik had demonstrated something terrifying. Humans could turn their own sun into a weapon by using gravity to accelerate projectiles to relativistic speeds. Any species with enough determination and basic physics knowledge could build weapons that could destroy entire fleets. The humans had just proved it was possible. The psychological impact on the Devourer fleet was immediate. They realized they were not just fighting for control of one star system. They were fighting an enemy that could potentially threaten Devourer fleets anywhere in the galaxy. Admiral Taeho's broadcast that evening was brief and professional, but Veltar could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "Devourer fleet," Taeho said. "You have lost 40% of your ships. We have lost 70% of ours. By the mathematics you mentioned earlier, you are winning. But mathematics is not everything, and we are not finished. We have weapons you have not seen yet. We have strategies you have not faced yet. We have a reason to fight that you cannot understand. Leave now while you still can." The Devourer Admiral's response was no longer angry. For the first time, it sounded uncertain. "Humans, what do you want from us?" "We want you to remember," Taeho replied. "We want you to tell other Devourer fleets what happened here. We want you to spread the word that humans are not good prey. We fight too hard. We cost too much. We make victory taste like defeat. And if we refuse to leave," Taeho's answer made Veltar shiver, "then we will teach you why some victories are not worth winning." As the 4th day ended, Veltar realized he was no longer recording a battle between two military forces. He was recording the birth of a new type of warfare, and possibly a new type of species. The humans had discovered that reputation could be more powerful than weapons. Fear could be more valuable than territory. The right kind of defeat could be more useful than the wrong kind of victory. They were not just fighting for their survival. They were fighting for their future security, teaching the galaxy that humanity was too dangerous to threaten casually. The Devourers had come to harvest a world. Instead, they were learning what it meant to be harvested themselves. The fifth day brought something that had never happened in recorded galactic history. A Devourer fleet chose to retreat from a battle they could still win. Veltar watched through his sensors as the surviving Devourer ships began moving away from Earth. They were not fleeing in panic or routing in defeat. They were conducting an organized withdrawal, like professional soldiers who had decided the objective was not worth the cost. By any military standard, the Devourers should have pressed their attack. They still outnumbered the human fleet by more than 2 to 1. They controlled significant portions of Earth's surface. Their technology remained superior to anything humans possessed, but numbers and technology were no longer the deciding factors in this battle. Admiral Te-Ho had achieved something that military theorists thought was impossible. He had made a stronger enemy choose to lose rather than pay the price of winning. The final human broadcast came from Earth's surface, where Commander Jiwan stood in the ruins of Seoul. Behind her, human civilians were already emerging from their shelters, beginning the work of rebuilding their shattered city. "Devourer fleet," Jiwan said, her voice carrying across space on all frequencies. "You are leaving. That is good. But before you go, understand what happened here. You came to harvest our world and we turned our world into a weapon against you. You came to destroy our civilization and we made our entire civilization into an army. You came to teach us fear and instead you learned it." The Devourer Admiral's final transmission was barely audible, filled with static from damaged communication equipment. This was not victory. "No," Admiral Te-Ho replied from his battered command ship. "This was education. Take what you learned here back to your people. Tell them what it costs to fight humans. Tell them we are not good prey." As the Devourer fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Veltar began compiling his report for the Galactic Council. But he realized that no report could truly capture what he had witnessed. He had watched a species transform itself in 5 days of combat. The humans who emerged from this battle were not the same people who had entered it. They had discovered something about themselves that even they had not known before. They had discovered that they could make even gods afraid. The casualty reports were devastating. Humanity had lost 68% of their military fleet. 7 major cities lay in ruins. Nearly 4 million humans had died in the fighting, both military and civilian. But the Devourers had lost something more valuable than ships or soldiers. They had lost their reputation for invincibility. Chief Strategist Su Jin's final analysis, transmitted to the Galactic Council along with Veltar's report, would become required reading at military academies across the galaxy. "We did not win this battle through superior technology or greater numbers. We won by making victory more expensive than our enemies were willing to pay. We taught them that some prey bites back so hard that the predator starves from its wounds." Captain Yunwu, now the senior surviving pilot in the human fleet, had become a legend among his own people. His final mission report was simple but chilling. The enemy retreated not because they could not defeat us, but because defeating us would have cost them everything they gained from victory. "We turned our weakness into their weakness. We made our mortality into their nightmare." But it was Dr. Haijin's technical report that truly frightened Veltar. The human engineer had spent the last day of battle analyzing captured Devourer technology, and her findings were disturbing. "Their ships are more advanced than ours," she wrote, "but their design philosophy is fundamentally flawed. They build for conquest against enemies who want to preserve their civilizations. They are not prepared to fight enemies who are willing to destroy everything, including themselves, to hurt their attackers. We can exploit this weakness." The humans were already planning how to fight the next Devourer fleet. The political aftermath was immediate and profound. Within hours of the Devourer retreat, 17 different species contacted the Galactic Council, requesting formal alliance treaties with humanity. These were not offers of protection or charity. They were requests for mutual defense pacts with a species that had just proved it could make ancient enemies choose retreat over victory. Ambassador, Veltar found himself in the unprecedented position of witnessing the birth of a new galactic power. The humans, who had been barely tolerated observers just 5 days earlier, were suddenly the most sought-after allies in known space. Admiral Te-Ho's response to these offers was characteristically measured. We welcome friendship with all peaceful species. But understand what friendship with humanity means. It means we will fight for you as hard as we fought for ourselves. It also means we expect you to fight for us the same way. The message was clear. Humanity was offering protection to species that proved worthy of it, and demanding the same commitment in return. Su Jin was appointed as humanity's first ambassador to the Galactic Council, replacing their previous observer status with full voting membership. Her first speech to the assembled representatives became famous throughout civilized space. We learned something about ourselves in this battle. We learned that we would rather die fighting than live in fear. We offer this lesson freely to anyone who wants to learn it. We also offer our friendship to anyone brave enough to accept it. But it was her final statement that sent ripples of excitement and fear through galactic politics. The age of easy conquest is over. Any species that threatens the innocent will now face not just their intended victims, but everyone who has learned to fight like humans. The psychological impact spread far beyond the council chambers. Within months, Veltar began receiving reports from across the galaxy of species adopting human military tactics. The concept of asymmetrical warfare became standard doctrine at military academies. More importantly, the idea of fighting with complete commitment rather than calculated risk began changing how civilized species thought about defense. The humans had proved that determination could overcome technological disadvantage if applied with sufficient intelligence and creativity. The Devourers themselves withdrew to the outer rim of the galaxy, avoiding contact with any species that showed signs of human influence. Other aggressive races began calculating the costs of conquest more carefully, knowing that their victims might have learned to fight back with human ferocity. A year later, Veltar returned to Earth to conduct a follow-up study. What he found amazed him. The humans had not only rebuilt their damaged cities, they had redesigned them as integrated defense networks. Every new building included features that could be used for military purposes if needed. Every civilian was trained in basic combat and emergency response, but they had also done something else. They had opened their military academies to students from other species, teaching alien cadets how to think like humans in combat situations. Admiral Tejo, now promoted to Supreme Commander of Human Defense Forces, explained the philosophy. We learned that the best way to avoid having to fight is to make sure everyone knows how we fight. Fear is a better deterrent than weapons, and respect is better than fear. Commander Jiwan had established the Human Tactical Institute, where officers from dozens of species came to study urban warfare and guerrilla tactics. Her students learned not just human techniques, but human psychology. How to fight when victory seemed impossible. How to turn desperation into strength. Squadron leader Yun Wu, now General Yun Wu, commanded a mixed fleet of human and alien vessels. His pilots came from 12 different species, all trained in the human philosophy of combat. Make every shot count. Make every sacrifice meaningful. Make victory so expensive that enemies choose peace instead. Dr. Haye Jin had become the galaxy's leading expert on defensive engineering. Her designs were being implemented on hundreds of worlds, turning peaceful planets into fortresses that could defend themselves against any aggressor. But it was Su Jin's final project that represented humanity's true victory. She was writing a book called The Mathematics of Determination, which analyzed how psychological factors could overcome material disadvantages in military conflicts. The book became the most widely read military text in galactic history. Its central thesis was simple but revolutionary. Any species could learn to fight like humans if they understood what they were fighting for and were willing to pay any price to preserve it. As Veltar prepared his final report, he realized he had witnessed something unprecedented in the galaxy's history. He had watched a single battle change the nature of interstellar politics forever. The humans had not just defended their home world. They had redefined what it meant to be prey and what it meant to be a predator. They had taught the galaxy that there were worse things than death, better things than survival, and more important things than victory. They had shown that sometimes the weak could become strong, not by gaining power, but by refusing to be weak. Most importantly, they had proved that even gods could learn to fear, if the right species taught them the right lessons. Veltar's final entry in his report would be quoted in history books for centuries. I came to observe the extinction of a primitive species. Instead, I witnessed the birth of something the galaxy had never seen. A people who discovered that courage, properly applied, could make giants kneel.